On October 21st, 2025, former Senator Antonio Trillanes IV filed a series of serious complaints with the Office of the Ombudsman, targeting Senator Christopher Lawrence Bong, former President Rodrigo Duterte, and members of Go's immediate family. The complaints represent one of the most significant allegations of corruption against a sitting Philippine senator in recent years, involving claims of plunder, graft, and violations of ethical standards for public officials. The legal basis for these complaints rests on three major Philippine laws. First, the Plunder Law, officially known as Republic Act 7080, which addresses the illegal accumulation of wealth by public officials through a pattern of criminal acts. Second, the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, or RA 3019, which prohibits public officials from using their positions for private gain or engaging in corrupt practices. Third, the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Public Officials, RA 6713, which sets out the expected behavior and ethical guidelines for those serving in government. Together, these laws form the framework for what Trillanes characterizes as a systematic scheme to enrich private parties through the misuse of public office and government resources. The heart of Trillanes' allegations centers on what he describes as the large-scale awarding of government infrastructure contracts to construction firms owned by members of Bongo's family. According to the complaint, two companies figure prominently in this alleged scheme. The first is CLTG Builders, a firm owned by Go's father, Desiderio Go. Trillanes claims that between 2007 and 2018, CLTG Builders was awarded approximately 125 public works contracts with a combined value of around 4.89 billion pesos. The second company is Alfredo Builders and Supply, owned by Go's half-brother, Alfredo Go. This firm allegedly received about 59 government contracts, worth approximately 1.74 billion pesos during the same period. In his 2025 filing, Trillanes updated these figures, alleging that since 2016, these family-linked construction firms have collectively been awarded contracts totaling 6.95 billion pesos. This time frame is particularly significant because 2016 marks the beginning of the Duterte administration, during which Bong served first as special assistant to President Duterte and later as a senator. Trillanes emphasizes that many of these contracts were concentrated in the Davao region, areas where the Duterte-Go political network held considerable influence and power. The complaint portrays Senator Go as the central figure in an elaborate scheme to channel public funds to his family's businesses. Trillanes characterizes Go as the hub of this operation, with his father and half-brother serving as the spokes in a network designed to divert government resources for private enrichment. The allegation is that Go, by virtue of his powerful positions, both as the president's closest aide and later as a senator, was able to intervene in the process of awarding and approving government contracts, ensuring that projects went to companies owned by his relatives. This represents what Trillanes calls the use of public office for private gain, a clear violation of anti-corruption laws. Adding another layer to the allegations, Trillanes questions the qualification and capacity of the family-owned firms to handle such large government projects. The complaint asserts that both CLTG Builders and Alfredo Builders and Supply were significantly undercapitalized, meaning they lack sufficient financial resources to properly execute major infrastructure projects. Furthermore, these companies allegedly held only a Class B contractor's license, which typically limits the size and value of projects a firm can undertake. Yet despite these limitations, they somehow secured large government contracts that would normally be beyond their licensing authority. To circumvent these restrictions, Trillanes alleges that the Go family firms entered into joint ventures with larger, more established contractors. These partnerships with companies holding AAA ratings, the highest contractor classification, allowed the smaller firms to qualify for bigger projects while still benefiting financially from the arrangements. One specific example cited in the complaint involves joint ventures between CLTG Builders, Alfrego Builders, and St. Gerard Construction, a company owned by individuals named Curly and Sarah Discaya. These joint venture arrangements allegedly resulted in contracts worth approximately 816 million pesos. The legal argument underlying the plunder charge is that the pattern and scale of contract awards exceed the statutory threshold of 50 million pesos required for plunder cases. Trillanes contends that the evidence shows an official acquiring ill-gotten wealth through conspiracy with family members and business associates, which fits the definition of plunder under Philippine law. Beyond the sheer monetary value, the complaint emphasizes the systematic nature of the alleged scheme, suggesting it was not isolated incidents, but rather a coordinated effort to funnel public money to private parties over many years. Trillanes also points to what he characterizes as clear conflicts of interest and violations of procurement laws. Philippine law prohibits the awarding of government contracts to the immediate family members of public officials precisely to prevent this type of corruption. The complaint argues that the repeated awarding of contracts to companies owned by Go's father and half-brother represents a blatant disregard for these legal safeguards designed to ensure fairness and transparency in government procurement. To support his allegations, Trillanes cites records from the Commission on Audit, the government body responsible for auditing public expenditures and ensuring accountability in the use of government funds. These COA records purportedly document the awarding of numerous contracts to the two family-linked construction firms. The complaint also references documentary evidence, including contract records and affidavits, as well as testimonial evidence that Trillanes claims supports the allegations against Go and his co-respondents. An important element of Trillanes' narrative is the timing of these contract awards. He emphasizes that the pattern of government projects going to the Go family firms intensified during the period when Bong wielded significant political influence, particularly during the Duterte administration. This temporal correlation, according to the complaint, demonstrates a direct link between Go's political power and his family's business success, suggesting that one enabled the other. Adding to his claims of wrongdoing, Trillanes alleges that this is not the first time he has raised these concerns. He states that an earlier version of the complaint, filed in July 2024, and involving allegations of 6.6 billion pesos in questionable contracts, was either buried or not properly investigated. This claim of a possible cover-up adds another dimension to the scandal, suggesting that powerful political forces may have previously intervened to protect Go from scrutiny. In presenting his case to the Ombudsman, Trillanes has framed his actions as a matter of principle and public duty. He states that his objective is to ensure accountability in government and to prevent public office from being used for private gain. He characterizes the evidence he has compiled as compelling and argues that it warrants serious investigation and prosecution for plunder. In his words, the documentation and testimony he has gathered make a strong case that Senator Go and his co-respondents violated the public trust for personal enrichment. However, it is crucial to note that these remain allegations. At this stage of the legal process, filing a complaint with the Ombudsman is the beginning of a potentially long investigative and judicial process, not a determination of guilt. Senator Go's camp has vigorously disputed these claims, characterizing them as politically motivated attacks, rather than legitimate concerns about corruption. The history of political rivalry between the Duterte-Go alliance and Trillanes, who was a vocal critic of the former administration, lends some context to this defense. The path forward will require the Ombudsman to review the evidence, determine whether there is probable cause to file charges, and potentially prosecute the case. The ultimate resolution, should it reach that point, would rest with the courts. Until then, the public is left with serious allegations on one side and firm denials on the other, awaiting the institutions of justice to sort through the claims and evidence to determine what, if anything, actually occurred.